You know what I was thinking about recently? The early 2010s was a weird time in movie making history. Mainstream Hollywood wasn't dying or anything, but there were a slew of really high-level films that were made around the typical Hollywood structure. Studios were trying to branch out and look for the next big trend, and this was the time where gimmicks became a real big thing. I think we all remember 3D. I wonder what happened to that. Found footage movies were also another really big gimmick that Hollywood was trying to pass off. Looking back at most of those found footage movies that were made back then, today, they really don't hold up. But there was one movie that kind of stood head and shoulders above every other found footage movie. And that movie was Chronicle.
I'm going to beam him.
Have you heard of Chronicle? Maybe you have. It wasn't that unpopular. It actually made a lot of money as well. But even if you haven't heard of the movie, I'm sure you might have heard of Dane DeHaan. And I know you've definitely heard of Michael B. Jordan. This movie may not have been Jordan's launch vehicle, but it directly led to his launch vehicle the next year, Fruitvale Station. So what's it about? Well, let's get started. Hi, and if you're new here, remember, if you enjoy the video, think about liking and give us a subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Chronicle is about 3 teenage boys who discover some sort of extraterrestrial object in an underground chasm that gives them superhuman abilities. That's the basic hook of the movie. But where this could have been any generic superpower movie, with the found footage gimmick like bringing it down completely, Chronicle is more of a deeper coming of age story as well. The movie's plot is always propelled forward by the supernatural aspect, but underneath that is a psychoanalysis of each of the 3 main characters, and their relationships together and how they bond closer together. And I think that aspect alone makes it a very worthwhile watch. Chronicle mainly follows Andrew, a socially awkward teen in Seattle who has pretty much no friends to talk to, aside from his cousin who gives him a ride to school. The movie begins with him buying a camera to record everything. His drunk and abusive father, his cancer-stricken mother, and his loneliness at school and at home. His cousin Matt decides to try and get him away from all of that and brings him to a party which, of course, he brings his camera to. And since this is the found footage movie, of course they introduce another character at the party who's constantly filming things for her blog. At the party, Andrew also meets Michael B. Jordan's character Steve, who is an acquaintance of Matt's. He tells him that they found some crazy pit and persuades Andrew to get some footage of it with them.
Just come get it on tape. It'll be cool.
When they investigate the hole, they come across a sort of glowing meteorite, which is always a bad sign. It begins to mess them up, and some sort of force just launches them all out of the hole and seals it up, breaking Andrew's camera in the process. The next day, after Matt buys Andrew a replacement camera, they all find out that they have superpowers. One thing I really like about how this movie handles their superpowers is that they only have the one. Telekinesis, basically. But they get kind of creative with this by creating force fields to protect them.
Oh, snap.
Or even lifting themselves up to the point where they can pretty much fly.
I got it. Flip yourself.
Come on, Matt. Come on.
Right. Oh, shit!
And what I really enjoyed about this is that they didn't craft it in a way that they wrote themselves into a corner. For some reason, in a lot of movies and TV shows like this, when one character gets a new superpower, they get all of these secondary superpowers as well that they never really discuss. For example, if a character gets the power of flight, for some reason they also get super strength and I guess super hearing and all that other stuff, so that they can actually withstand the speed and the force that they're flying at. But it's not like that in Chronicle. In Chronicle, they have to wear winter clothing or they get too cold up there.
It's freezing up here! I can't hear you!
Now at this point, you've seen a few clips of them already using their powers. And needless to say, if you're watching this in 2021 or later, it's kind of rough at some points. Luckily, a lot of the effects are very subtle and not really stylized, so even when they do use CGI, they don't use it to an extent where it's hyper visuals or anything that really makes it stand out. You can usually tell which of the overly smooth objects are going to be manipulated in the scene. And at times, the green screen edges really stand out. Regardless, the climax of the movie looks phenomenal and way better than the rest of the effects in the movie. I've heard a lot of the time effects in the movie are always tied to a budget. So if you see a really janky and crappy scene, it means that they're planning for some really good looking scene later on. And that's what the climax of the movie basically is. I mean, shit, the movie was made for only $12 million, although it is evident at some points. And just for reference, it made $126 million at the box office. So good for them. Now, with found footage movies, the writers always have to think of creative new ways to form a reason for why the characters are even filming in the first place. And a lot of the time, it really just feels unnatural and forced. But I think Chronicle is one of the few movies that avoids this because it integrates with the themes of the rest of the movie. Andrew actually records everything because he himself says that he prefers to view the world through a lens, detached from other people. And likewise, since the characters have the power of telekinesis, they can just hold the camera behind them while they record whatever they're doing. So really, in this movie, they wrote it so that they could get any angle they need necessary. Now, regarding characters, I think Andrew is a really complex and well-played character by Dane DeHaan. But I think for sure I like Steve's character the most. They could have easily just made him a generic jock or just a popular kid who was secretly just using the others. But they didn't. There's a reason he's the most popular guy in school. He's actually somebody that everybody likes right off the bat, including Andrew and the audience. He never tricks anybody, and although he might appear vain sometimes, it's nothing out of the ordinary for a typical high school kid. He's a good kid, and he rises above stigmas as well. When he first meets Andrew, he's genuinely friendly with him.
I remember you from homeroom freshman year. You always had that gray zip-up hoodie.
And throughout the movie, they become very close friends. And as the film goes on, he's the only one in the film who's actually inquiring about Andrew's home situation and trying to help him out. And he even makes himself vulnerable, sharing things about his home situation with Andrew.
Can you not say anything about that? Yeah, no way.
They really put a lot of work into writing Steve and Andrew's characters. And it does show. It's also one of the strengths of the movie. When this movie came out, I also remember constantly hearing people compare it to Akira. I can kind of see why, but seeing it now, I feel like that was just a hot take, and it doesn't really. And yeah, the director himself did say that Akira was an influence to this movie, but it's not literally Akira to Chronicle 1-to-1 or anything like that. Although there are some clearly inspired scenes. Personally, I would actually compare it more to one of the other inspirations for this movie. Carrie. But if you are going into this movie under the impression that it was somewhat similar to Akira, just don't go into it expecting it to be some grand philosophical epic or anything like that. But lastly, I just wanted to talk about spoilers a little bit and the ending, because it's something that kind of always bothered me, although it probably wouldn't bother most people. So if you are interested, go see Chronicle. It's a great movie. If you're interested in the spoilers, keep listening. Why the fuck was there never a sequel to this movie? This movie kind of feels like an origin story for Matt, since he's not as explored as the other two characters, but he's the last one standing at the end, so it almost feels like he had the most character development, especially because the climax is his character development. And what about all these other questions that really could have been answered? Where did the meteorite come from? Did he get training from those Tibetan monks or something? Were there more powers that he discovered that they could do? I honestly haven't been this let down by lack of a sequel since District 9. And I wonder what Matt does now anyway, because his life is pretty much over. Like, he can never go back to how it was. He can basically go anywhere he wants anyway, right? Well, a sequel was actually written by the same writer. Only Fox didn't like the script, so it ended up in development hell. However, there is currently a sequel being made to the movie, 10 years too late, which is always a bad sign. And with the marketing for the sequel, at least, they're kind of putting weight on the idea of a gender swap thing with an all-female cast. I mean, I'm not against that or anything, but that shouldn't be an advertisement for the movie. It should just be Chronicle, and then it just happens to be all women, I guess, or whatever. And I'm in no way against redoing a movie with a female cast. It just feels like such a low-hanging fruit that's lazy. So because of these two factors, I doubt that we'll get a continuation of Matt's story. He'll probably make a cameo because I don't know what the actor is doing these days. But take all of that how you will. Who knows? It might be amazing, right? But anyway, I just wanted to talk about Chronicle, this nice little gem from the early 2010s. This movie deserves to be seen. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that.